Everybody got a paper? One paper? All right, so we are in Life of Jesus, part 102. So, yeah, we're getting on up in there. All right, so how do we live within paganism? All right, you'll see where that comes in here with the question here. So we're in Matthew 14, verses 1 through 13, and we're going to look at the death of John the Baptist. So Matthew writes, "At that time Herod the Tetrarch heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, 'This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work with him.'" So let's talk about Herod for a second. So this is not the Herod from the Christmas story, right? This is not that Herod. But one of the things we need to understand about Herod was he is only nominally, at best, Jewish. Okay? So there's a couple of things going on in Israel at this time. One of the things is, so you go back and they've been under foreign rule for a long time, right? Ever since basically they've been overthrown by Babylon, they've been under foreign rule. So the one before Rome was Greece, and so before Rome you have Alexander the Great. Everybody heard of Alexander the Great before? Okay, basically conquers the known world at that time, which is pretty remarkable at the time. So he starts in Greece, goes all the way down to Africa, comes back out of Africa, goes across the Middle East, actually gets into India, and comes back and then dies in the Middle East, right? So, but he established a kingdom that covered Southern Europe, Northern Africa, Middle Asia, right? That's how far it goes. Now, one of the things he did, not only did he want to conquer everything, he wanted to institute Greek culture he considered Greek culture to be superior to all other cultures, so he wanted to institute Greek culture into these areas. So everywhere he goes, he builds a town called Alexandria. That's why there's Alexandria, Egypt, there's Alexandria here, Alexandria there. He builds these towns, and he names them after himself, Alexandrias. And within them, and especially the one in Egypt, he has this huge library. Not only that, they take classical Greek and they dumb it down into a form called Koine Greek, which basically means a common form of Greek. It's a dumbed down version of Greek, right? And they forcibly teach everybody to speak Koine Greek and to learn Koine Greek. This is why the New Testament is written in Koine Greek, because everybody knew Koine Greek, right? Now it's interesting. You had dialects of Koine Greek, so you had basically we have like the Israel version of Koine Greek. So it's a special. It took a long time to figure out how to translate the Bible really well, because it's not classical Greek. It's different. It's classical. It's a Koine Greek mixed with idioms and sayings from the Middle East, right? But anyway, so Greek culture becomes embedded in this whole area. Now, let's think about the Israelites for a minute. Now, most of the people are going to do what with Greek? Most of the people that he comes in, they take the Greek culture and they do what with it? They roll with it, right? They mix it into their culture and they just kind of roll with it. Why would the Israelites have a problem with that? Right, because they believe in the one true God. And the one true God has given them their law for their land, and it's not to be mixed with anything else. Right? So they have a problem with Greek culture. Right? They have a major problem with Greek culture, because Greek culture is pagan. Right? It's pagan. A lot of things go. Right? The morality is extremely lax, especially in comparison to the Israelite laws. Extremely lax. In other words, all the stuff that the Israelite says you shouldn't do, the Greeks are like, yeah, we do that.
Yeah, false gods, and they would do that immorality in their temples.
Right. I mean, it's as bad as it gets, right? It's as bad as it gets, right? So they're very, very opposed to Greek culture. Right? So now what you've got going on in Israel, you've got some of the Jews. Now you got to realize again, Herod actually is not Jewish. He actually comes from outside of Judaism. His family does. So they are nominally Jewish. Because to be the king of Israel, you're supposed to be Jewish, so nominally he's Jewish. And actually, he's actually building up the temple. Right? So he's actually nominally Jewish, but he's not like a devout Jew. So you have within then the nation of Israel, you have a couple of factions. You have the people who are very, very devout Jews who are very, very worried about keeping the law. Does anybody know what we call these people?
Pharisees.
Pharisees. Right? Pharisees. Pharisees are so concerned with keeping the law that they give you an extra set of rules to make sure that you don't accidentally break the law. You see what I'm saying? They're like, yeah, not to work. You're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. So here we're going to give you a list of rules to make sure you don't work on the Sabbath. Now we kind of make fun of that. And we laugh at that. But here's the thing: they were actually truly concerned about it. You see what I mean? They were concerned about holiness. It wasn't just they wanted to give you a bunch of rules. They were given these rules for a reason. Right? They wanted to make sure people didn't break the law of God. They believed it was important that people keep the law of God. So they wanted to give you a list of rules that made sure you didn't break the law of God accidentally. Right? Now, the problem becomes, why do you have rules and why do you have the law of God? Why do you have it? What's the purpose of it?
To restrain people, keep them within boundaries.
Okay, from doing what though? Why do we want to restrain them? Why do we want to keep them in boundaries? Why? Okay, why? There's an ultimate reason here. Anybody?
That makes you less like God.
Okay, less like God, yes, but there's beyond that. We struggle with this because it hurts people. Right? What's God most concerned with? Himself, His image. Therefore, what you're saying, He's concerned for people because they're made in His image. God really loves people, and God really doesn't want people to get hurt. So He institutes these laws and these commands to protect people. Now, what becomes the problem? When we make the laws and the commands more important than what?
Protecting people.
People, right? Yeah. See, now, if again, most of us come from the conservative side of things. I understand that. But here's the thing. On the conservative side, we tend to err to where we can become concerned for law and order's sake. You see what I'm saying? You should keep law and order just because you should keep law and order. But we'll forget sometimes that the purpose of law and order is to protect people. Does that make sense? So that's what the Pharisees had forgotten. Right? They had forgotten that the purpose of these laws, the purpose of God's holiness, was to protect people. And so they had added these rules to the law in order to try to keep the law, but the rules they had added to the law were actually damaging to people. Right? It was a burden that they couldn't bear. It made life so difficult on them. Does that make sense? That all these extra rules that the Pharisees thought there. So did the Pharisees have good intentions when they did this? Yeah, they actually had good intentions. This was not bad intention. Now, there are some of them who take advantage of it. Right? It's like anything that ever happens. There's people who take advantage of it and use it to gain power. Right? But that's not the majority of them. Does that make sense? So, who do the Pharisees really besides the Romans? We know the Romans. Who else in Israel do they really dislike?
The Greeks.
The Greeks. And especially the Jews who are adopting Greek culture. Right? And we're calling them Hellenized Jews. Hellenized means Greek culture. So it's Hellenized Jews. So they really hate the Jews who are adopting Greek culture. Why? Because it's paganism. Right? Now, there's the one political religious group you have is the Pharisees. Does anybody know the name of the other political religious group? Sadducees, right? Now, so who are the Sadducees hanging out with? That's the Hellenized Jews, right? They're the more progressive political religious group. They like the Hellenized Jews. That's where the money's at. Right? So they're hanging out. They like guys like Herod. Right? So Let's read on a little bit about here. So you get that idea is going. Now, John the Baptist comes into all this. And who does John the Baptist insult?
Everybody.
Everybody. He insults the Pharisees. He insults the Sadducees. He insults Herod. And you see... Go ahead. Right. And you see a little bit right here. You see a little bit of Herod's paganism right here. He says that he talks about Jesus and calls Jesus John the Baptist risen from the dead. Well, a Jew wouldn't say that. A Jew knows that you're dead, and you're dead. There's no reincarnation. Do you see what I mean? So you see some of Herod's paganism here showing through. Going on from there, it says, Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had been saying to him, It is not lawful for you to have her. Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people because they considered John a prophet. Okay. So here we really start to see Herod's paganism and his Greek culture shining through. Right? His sister-in-law had left his brother to marry Herod. Now, when somebody leaves somebody to be with somebody else, generally something's already happened. Y'all see what I'm saying? Generally.
Always.
Every now and again. But you know what I'm saying. You see what I mean? So, for this to have happened, he had to have been carrying on an affair with his sister-in-law. Okay? Do you see that? Do you see his paganism kind of shine? Nominally, he's Jewish. But you see his paganism kind of shining through here? His brother's wife. Right. His brother's wife. Now here's the thing. We say that, but it happens all the time around here. Right? It happens. All right? But generally they kind of keep it hidden here a lot of times. She just went ahead and divorced him and married Herod. Right? Okay, so John the Baptist here calls him out on this. He says, hey man, that's not right. That's not right. So now let me ask this question. Can you see how the Pharisees are mad about this too? When we kind of throw the Pharisees under the bus, but let's think for a second. If you were a religious conservative in these days, who would you fall in with most likely?
Pharisees.
Right, because you would be the one who would be saying, hey, that's wrong, man. We need to be keeping the law of God here. That's wrong. Now the problem is, John has not only insulted Herod and the Sadducees, he's also insulted the Pharisees. So when he goes to insult Herod, is anybody taking up for John? Pharisees like, brother, you caught a snake, so you kind of on your own, man. Right? Even though the Pharisees hated Herod too, John the Baptist had insulted them too. So John the Baptist was kind of ostracized from everybody. Right, he don't care, and he really don't. I mean, John the Baptist. It's hard to even compare anybody in the Bible to John the Baptist. Again, we talked about this before. His dad was a priest, which means that he would have been a priest, which means he would have had it made. Right? He gave up a life of having it made. Apparently, he had taken a vow of poverty. Apparently, he had taken a vow of chastity. Right? I mean, he had really, truly given up everything for God. Right? And he not only did he give up everything, well, then he's challenging everybody. And ultimately, he's just about lost. His disciples are about his only friends left. Everybody's against him at this point. He's against Herod, and the Pharisees are against Herod, but because he insulted the Pharisees too, rightfully, they're against him too, so nobody's coming to his rescue at this point. Nobody's standing up for him. Right? So he's thrown in prison for telling Herod that what he's doing was wrong, and Herod wants to kill him. Again, his paganism is shining through. Wants to kill him, but he doesn't because he's afraid of the people, because they consider... Now, who's the only people that like John?
The people who followed him.
The people out there. The people are like, this guy, everything he says is true. He doesn't say anything is wrong. So yeah, politically we agree with the Pharisees, but man, the stuff they want us to do. John, you're right about what you said to the Pharisees. John, you're right about what you said to Herod. John, you're right about what you said about the Sadducees. Right? The people are kind of like, yeah, John, tell them. Tell them how it is, John. You tell them. You tell them. You tell them for me. Right? So the people kind of like John. All right. So going on the story. So now let's think of this idea of paganism. Think about Herod the Great, and just think about his paganism shining through. Right? Even though he's nominally a Jew, but he's really been Hellenized. He's really into Greek culture going on there. Now remember, he's already had an affair with his sister-in-law. Right? So now comes in his niece, his sister-in-law's daughter. Which from its way it's reading, it may be his brother's daughter. Remember, this is his brother-in-law, this is his sister-in-law, so this is probably even his biological niece, maybe his brother's daughter. I mean, that's just a logical assumption here, right?
His stepdaughter.
And his stepdaughter, too. Right, I'm my own grandpa. Anybody know that song? Ray Stevens? Anyway. If you know Ray Stevens, go listen to that song. All right. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guest and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." It's all fun and games till somebody goes and gets their head cut off. Right? So they're having them a Greek party. Right? Having them a Greek party. Everybody's a little tipsy. Right? Hot stepdaughter comes in and dances. Now, what is insinuated here is not that they have, but there's this insinuation already because he's already had an affair with his sister-in-law. This is his niece/stepdaughter that he's lusting over. Right? There's this insinuation here of incest. Not that anything happened between him and his stepdaughter, but just the insinuation of the desire. Right? You see his paganism shining through? Right? Now here, this is I'm going to talk about our culture for a minute. We're kind of insulated from it here, but I do a lot of reading. I'm a reading nut. I read a lot, and I read stuff that most people are not going to read because I want to know what's going on in the world. The debate about homosexuality and gay marriage, nobody has that debate anymore in our culture. What is being debated now is first polyamory, which is almost no longer being debated. It is to the point of acceptance, and what that is having multiple partners, often within marriage. That is based, so on HGTV earlier this year, they had their first polyamorous couple, or throuple, looking for a house together. A man, 2 women with children on HGTV. You know, the debate is already over if they're on TV. The debate's no longer being had on that. So where the debate is now, is basically consensual adult incest. That's the debate that's being had in our culture right now. Whether that is morally right or not. Now, if the debate is being had, it's because it is happening. A lot more than you think. A lot. For the debate to be being had, whether or not it's moral, it needs to be happening on a frequent enough basis for the debate to be being had. That's where we're at in our culture. Again, we're kind of insulated here. You get outside of the Bible Belt. Now, the thing is, it actually does happen here.
It's just behind closed doors.
It's more behind closed doors here because we're still in the Bible Belt. You get outside of the Bible Belt, and it's happening openly, and people are having this debate. Now, remember, we're talking about consensual adult. This is not involving children, so that's why it's being debated. We're talking about consenting adults who are parent and child, or siblings, or cousins, right? I mean, this is not. I'm not pulling this out of the dark web. This is on the legitimate news sources, really happening. Our paganism is shining through. Right? Does that make sense? In other words, we look at this story, it's like, oh, how dare he lust after his niece? How dare he lust after his stepdaughter? Listen, y'all. This is where we're at. Right? This is where we're at in our world today. So the point being is that there's a lot more similarity of what's going on here as what is going on in our world than we want to admit. Right? Again, we like to throw the Pharisees under the bus, right? But let's stop and think for a second. When it comes to this subject, how do we feel? We agree with the Pharisees. You see what I mean? And we look at the people who are Sadducees and are saying, I'm not sure that's all that wrong. And we're going, are you crazy? You see what I'm saying? So the debates that are happening at this time, the things that these people are mad about, the things that are going on here, it's going on right now. We're in the same culture. Right? And what happens if you're John the Baptist and you stand up and say, hey man, that's wrong. Hey man, that's wrong. Hey man, that's wrong. Well, now we have cancel culture.
That's right.
That shuts you up quick and fast. How dare you how dare you say that's wrong?
That's right.
How dare you condemn somebody else's lifestyle? Who are you to judge? Right?
If anybody had the right.
Right, and John the Baptist is the guy that's got the right. I mean, again, none of us morally compare to John the Baptist. You know what I'm saying? This is a guy, again, who's about as close to Jesus as any human being gets. Right? If anybody had the right to stand up and say who's wrong besides Jesus, it's John the Baptist. But what happens? He gets canceled. Right? Herod cancels him, puts him in prison. And then you have the paganism starts shining through, right? The lifestyle starts shining through. And what starts to happen is they say, hey, look, we can't tolerate these people over here telling us we're wrong. To the point of, let's just get rid of them. Let's shut them up permanently, right? Now, I'm not saying they're coming for our heads anytime soon. I don't think they are. But, but there's going to be conflict there, and they're going to want to cancel, people saying what's right and what's wrong. All right, so on Herod's birthday, no, we already did that one, sorry. So the king was distressed, but because of his oath and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. All right, so now it's interesting here. Could the king have said, that's just stupid?
He could have.
He could have, and he should have.
That's right.
You know what I mean? He said, yeah, but you swore an oath. Man, people broke their oath all the time. We talked about that in the Sermon on the Mount, that people would preface their oaths with certain things. So they say, yeah, I swore that, but I swore it by this, so I don't actually have to keep it. He could have said that. He said, you know what? I swore that, and I didn't, but I swore it the wrong way. I didn't cross my I's and dot my T's correctly. I don't have to keep that oath. He could have. But he's more worried about what the pagan culture thinks of him. You see how he's just nominally a Jew, but he's really gotten to this pagan culture. So now he's worried about what this pagan culture thinks of him. Right? He's got to keep his pagan friends happy. There's probably some of these drunk Greeks who are kind of like, yeah, cut his head off, man. Yeah. Think about it. I mean, we're like, well, that's disgusting. We watch movies, people getting his head cut off all the time.
Still happens overseas.
Oh, and it happens overseas a lot, but I'm talking about just here in America, we're fine with people getting their heads cut off as long as it's on a TV show and it's fake.
Desensitized.
Right. Why are we enjoying people getting their head cut off? Right? Because we're pagan. Our culture is a lot more pagan than we want to admit, especially because we're insulated in the Bible Belt. But you get outside of here where people just really have already moved beyond the Bible and they don't talk about the Bible. They don't have sexual morals anymore, right? And so they look at violence as entertainment. Which is where this is at. You know what I'm saying? This is violence as entertainment. That's what this is. Right? But again, that's where we're at as a culture. This is where we're at now. Right? And we feel like that we have to keep up the appearance of it. That, well, I said that's wrong, but I don't want people coming down on me that hard. I mean, that's what Herod's thinking here. I don't want my whole culture coming down on me. Rather than be canceled myself, I'm going to appease the culture. Right? And he appeases the culture. So John's disciples came and took his body and buried it, right? Then they went and told Jesus. So here's where we got to get into us. Right? Now, let's remember what they thought the Messiah was. Right? Now remember, at times they were questioning if John was the Messiah. They thought maybe John was the Messiah. They're really looking for a Messiah. Now remember, because they don't really completely understand the Old Testament, they're looking for a Messiah who's going to lead them into battle right then and there and throw the Romans and throw the Greek pagans out of Israel. We're going to deal with this paganism once and for all, and we're going to get it out of Israel, and we're going to turn Israel back into what Israel's supposed to be. John the Baptist, you going to lead us? No, not me. Well, who is the Messiah, John the Baptist? Right? So they're really looking for a Messiah. How many people you think, now remember, the people like John the Baptist, right? When pagan Herod and his Greek Roman friends cut off John the Baptist's head, how do you think the people feel about that? If there was a point to start a revolution, this would be it. Right? If you wanted to gather the people together and have a revolution and kick the pagans out of Israel, this would be the time to do it, wouldn't it? So they go to Jesus. They tell Jesus what's happened. Maybe he'll start a revolution. Maybe he's the Messiah. Maybe this is the time we gather up and we get these Romans and these Greeks and kick them out of here. When Jesus heard what happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Is that what we would do?
See, they had the right. He grieved. This was a man of God. There was none greater than John.
Right. Right. So let's think about it. Remember, we need to look at Jesus and what was it. Jesus knew that what? What the time and place.
Right.
Jesus knows there's going to be a time and place when he comes back the second time.
Amen.
Right? But the time and place isn't now.
Right.
The time and place is for him to go, so he gets away from the crowd because the people are kind of getting antsy now. The people are getting riled up, and he's like, step back, cool down. I have a hard time stepping back and cooling down. Really do. If you want to find the place that I am most unlike Jesus, it is stepping back and cooling down. I have a temper and a loud mouth. A bad combination. Right? And it's bad because I keep it under control a lot, and then when it comes out all at one time, and it's big and loud and scary. Okay? I would be the one who would probably been like, they killed who?
Let's go get them.
It's on. I would be Simon the Zealot. Right? I would be Simon the Zealot. But Jesus says, it's not the time. It's not the place. This is not what we're here to do. Because Jesus knows the future. Okay, so let's talk about what is the future of Israel. What happens? Again, Jesus knows this. Who wins in the end? Do the religious conservatives win or do the pagans win? Not in the end, at this point in history, because I don't want to jump ahead a couple thousand years. At this point in history, who wins? The pagans win.
That's right.
The pagans won. I mean, Israel, they kicked the Jews out, and it basically becomes a Roman providence. Jerusalem, they kicked the Jews completely out of Jerusalem. There are no Jews allowed in Jerusalem, and rebuild it as a pagan Roman city. Destroy the temple to where not a stone is standing on top of a stone. The pagans win. Not only that, the pagans win big, because the pagans established the Roman Empire, which basically still exists, which we are basically an extension of. Right? Jesus knows this. Jesus knows that it's not going to be the nation of Israel that's going to spread discipleship of Jesus around the world. That what he's actually going to do, he's going to embed his disciples into the Roman Empire, And the Roman Empire, or the extensions of the Roman Empire, are basically going to spread discipleship of Jesus around the world, which it did. Imperfectly at times, right? Very imperfectly at times. But they do it. And he knows that. He knows the Roman pagans are going to win, but he's got to ace up his sleeve, where what he does is his disciples are embedded into the Roman Empire. Even when the Roman Empire supposedly becomes Christian, which it really doesn't, just supposedly does, there's still true Christians inside of it, right, that are spread, and it's preserved all throughout, even though at times the Roman Empire, the Christian Roman Empire itself, is trying to destroy true Christianity.
That's right.
Right? God preserves true Christianity. At times he preserves it in no other places but inside monasteries. Right? But God preserves it, and it spreads through the Roman Empire. See, Jesus knows that. Jesus knows how this whole thing is going to play out. This is why Jesus can be like, calm down, cool off, relax, right? And like Stan said, yes, he is grieving over it, and he gets away from everything, and he goes into solitude, and he goes and he prays. Right? Does that make sense? So we are in, again, going back to our culture. We're in the same situation. A very, very, very similar situation, where paganism is running rampant all around our culture. If we consider Western civilization, which is Europe and us, paganism has far taken over the whole thing. Right? We just isolate it to America. We're pretty much there to where there's more pagans than there are Christians. Right? We're pretty much there. And so we've gotten to this point to where we're kind of surrounded by paganism. And we're living in paganism. And a lot of us, for the first time ever, because we grew up when Christianity was the norm. Christianity was the culture. And all of a sudden, it's beginning more and more and more that paganism is the culture. And so we need to look at Jesus here, and we need to ask, okay, how did Jesus deal with this problem? Did he get all tore up and bent out of shape about it? No, because he knew the end of the story. He knew how the thing was going to play out. Right? Now, we don't get to know every single detail like Jesus did. Right? Now, here's the thing. Would I like to see a nationwide revival? I would. I'd love to. But I can't tell you for a fact that's going to happen. You see what I'm saying? Am I going to work towards that end? Yeah, I'm going to work towards that end. Am I guaranteed that's going to happen? I'm not guaranteed that's going to happen. What am I guaranteed that is going to happen?
He's going to come again and make it right.
Right. I'm guaranteed that. I'm guaranteed that even though the pagans won this time in ancient Israel, and even though the pagans might be winning now, the culture war, which I think the culture war got lost a long time ago, I know that in the end, Jesus wins.
Right.
Okay? Even if it's after I die. You see what I mean? So, right now, inside of paganism, I need to have a clear head. Right? Now, that's not to say that I don't do like John the Baptist and say that's wrong. That's really, really wrong. And you shouldn't be doing that. Right? And when I'm put in a situation where Herod was put in and he had to make a choice between doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing, that I choose to do the right thing, even though it loses me all my friends. Or my supposed friends. Herod could have made a really good friend at that point in time, couldn't he? He could have made a really good friend with the two people that he only needed to be friends with that time, John the Baptist and Jesus. Right? He could have said, no, we ain't doing this, y'all. This is wrong. We ain't doing it. As we're in that culture and we look around us and the culture becomes more and more pagan, there's going to be times where we're going to have to say, hey guys, you know what? We're not doing this. We're not doing this. I'm not doing this. If you're doing this, you go ahead and do this, but I'm not doing it with you. I'm stepping out of the culture. I'm breaking free of the culture. Even if everybody thinks I'm weird because I broke free of the culture, because I'm not doing what all the rest of the culture is doing, I'm breaking free, I'm different. Right? We have to be like John the Baptist. We have to say, you know what, that's wrong. You know, but and it leaves you with even the people that were on your side previously. Like the Pharisees were probably on John the Baptist's side until John the Baptist looked at the Pharisees and said, you got wrong about some stuff too. Right. They were enjoying the part where he was, giving the Sadducees down the road and telling the Romans down the road and giving Herod down the road. But then when he turned on them, he said, you know what, you're wrong about some stuff too. Now, the interesting thing about the Pharisees is that they were right about a lot. This is actually why Jesus interacted with them more than he did anybody else, because they were right about more than everybody else was. So he was really hard on them about, look, y'all got a lot right, but y'all got some things that are really, really wrong. And you need to fix the things that are really, really wrong. And that's why probably a lot of Pharisees, because we know like Nicodemus was a Pharisee that followed Jesus. We know that Paul, was a Pharisee that followed Jesus. Right? Because theologically he agreed with Jesus. But Nicodemus and Saul both had to be told where they were wrong at so that they could follow Jesus. You see what I'm saying? Your theology's right, but you got some things wrong, and you need to get these things right and follow Jesus as his disciple. Both those guys had to be told that. So what I want you to take away from this is this one sentence right here. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Now, again, we know what he did in that solitary place. What he always did first and foremost, he got alone, he got quiet, and he prayed. Amen. Right? We need to realize what's going on around us, how kind of crazy it is. I mean, it's crazy. Right? Probably maybe one of the first things we need to do is get quiet, get alone, and pray. And say, God, in this situation we're in right now, what would you have me to do? Not just quick prayer. We talk about, a lot I've heard people talk about prayer, say, it's kind of hard to pray because, man, my mind just spins. Maybe you need to be spending more time in prayer, so let your mind spin until it stops spinning.
Amen. Spin out.
You see what I'm saying? Maybe that's just a sign that, okay, I need to pray a little longer and allow. Like I said, Todd's better at this than any of us. Get alone, get quiet, and right. I mean, I struggle with it. I mean, that's something that I don't do well. I don't do well, right? No, sorry. I do well with running my mouth. I don't do well with getting alone, getting quiet, and thinking things through. But that's actually what Jesus did. In times that we wouldn't do it, right? That's what I learned. When I read this, that's what I take away. Man, it's because of me. Because I'm the guy that's been like, man, they cut John the Baptist's heads off. I'm getting some heads back in return. That'd been me. Right? But then he adds this little thing is that Jesus said, you know what? Things are a little crazy right now. And I don't think we need to be acting the way we're acting because I know how this thing plays out. I don't think we need to be doing what y'all think we need to be doing. And I'm actually going to get away from all y'all. And I'm actually going to get quiet. And I'm going to pray about this. And I'm going to think this thing out. And when things calm down a little bit, then we're going to start addressing them again. All right? Does that make sense? It's kind of a weird... That last sentence tacked on the end of this thing kind of changes the whole thing, don't it? Right? Now again, we know there's a day Jesus is coming back. And he is going to gather some heads up in repayment. But the day's not today. At least not yet anyway. 3 hours left in the day. But this is something I know that I personally have to hear because it's something that for me, I tend to jump into the fray. I tend to jump into the fray. And I'm learning to step back and think. And even though I might think that it needs to be addressed right here, right now, maybe it don't need to be addressed right here, right now. Maybe it needs to be addressed after I've calmed down and thought things out and got a clearer head and spent some time alone with God praying about this. Maybe God's got some things he can tell me about this that I don't know yet. Let's go to closing prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this story of Jesus, and we thank you for what we can learn about Jesus from here. Father, we know that just like things were crazy in Israel at this time, things are crazy in our world right now, Father. There's a lot going on. There's things we want to do and things we want to say, but before we do and say some things that we would like to do and say, Father, help the Holy Spirit to remind us to take the time to pray, to sit, to think things out, to get alone with God, to clear our heads out, clear our minds out, spend some time alone with you, just you, and have us to know what you would have us to do, Father, not necessarily what we would want to do, just at the spur of the moment, Father. We know that there's great injustices going on. It was an injustice that John the Baptist got his head cut off, and we have injustices going on around us, Father. But we ask you, Father, that when we would face those injustices the way Jesus would face those injustices, not the way that we would face those injustices. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. He might be glorified among us.